You're listening to the Mark Digital Live podcast produced by Felzine. Follow us everywhere at FELTZINE and follow me, Mark Digital, at MarkDigitalHD as in high definition. If you're a fan of the podcast and want to join the conversation or listen live, you can do that by hopping on our Discord channel. That link can be found in the description of this and every podcast we produce, along with the links to all of our other social media channels. So check that out and leave us a review wherever you're listening. So, in general, on here, I try to have this rule where I don't talk about anywhere that I haven't been, and I try not to talk about places and communities and just people that I have no real kind of first-hand connection to. However, this story that I came across hit me in a really deep way. And as I kind of tell this story and I talk about why this is important to me, I hope that y'all will understand why I decided to break the rule for this story and kind of get into this. So, first and foremost, this is actually kind of sad. It's sad in a lot of different ways. I think it's sad in every way that you can possibly interpret this story. And essentially, there's a Congolese anti-Ebola activist who goes by the name of Papi Moumbere Mahamba. I have to apologize already. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he was 35 and he was stabbed to death, and they also stabbed his wife, and they burned his house down. And this is all because he's an Ebola activist. He's anti-Ebola. All he wants to just do is fucking save people's lives, and it's wild. And I'm gonna when I first read this story, right, I was like, yo, why would anybody kill someone for being against Ebola? And then I was like, yo, what the fuck is an Ebola activist? Like, everyone wants to get rid of Ebola. Who the fuck wants Ebola? And why? Who likes Ebola enough for there to need to even exist activists? Like, the shit just didn't make sense to me. Like, why do we need anti-Ebola activists at all? Like who's pro-Ebola? But the wild thing is, as I tell you the story, you're gonna see that, like, this shit is actually necessary. So, first and foremost, R.I.P. to Papi Mahamba. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to your family. I'm sorry for that you ever had to deal with this shit. The more I learned about Papi, it turned out that he was also a radio host, and that shit hit me even more. You know, he's a radio host in his 30s. He has a wife, and man, like, a black man, like, there's so much for me that this feels like, fuck, like, I understand, you know what I'm saying, the weight of this. And I feel like, in a lot of ways, to even get on the mic anywhere, any country, and say some shit that you believe in, and, you know, be against some shit or for some shit, no matter what that happens to be, is never easy. And, like, I mean, that's why at the end of the day, like, I do have a certain respect for people who might be on the alt-right, or who might, like, have some shit that people might, like, look at me and look at them and see us as totally different sides. But I just respect anybody who gets on the mic and says some shit that they actually believe in, you know? So anyway, that's one side of the story of why this is important to me. A radio host. I think the idea of black radio across the world, Radio Africa is a thing, but African radio, black radio, as in, you know, African American radio, Jamaican radio, like Radio of the Caribbean, like I could go on and on. I mean, this is just an important part of so many cultures, but definitely black cultures throughout the diaspora. So, R.I.P. to Papi. That's first and foremost. And fuck Ebola. This is like the worst, fucking like chemical, like, virus that's ever just even existed in humankind. And this is literally like the worst shit that you could get. I think, what was the book? The Hot Zone or the Red Zone? That shit was written about Ebola. Like, this shit is fucked, man. Like, we gotta I don't know. Anyway, let me try to stay on track with this because I even try to write notes for this one because I knew as soon as I started talking about it, it would get so emotional for me in so many ways that it was going to be difficult. It actually took me like 2 or 3 days to even kind of sit down and start to be able to record this. So, I guess I want to go back and give like a personal history, a personal family history, and then I'll give a history of the Congo, and then we'll talk about where we're at today, where we could even have this situation where an anti-Ebola activist is murdered in his home by his own people that he's trying to save from having Ebola. First and foremost, I have always grown up hearing beautiful, amazing stories about the Congo. My grandparents had spent the early years of my mother's life in the Congo. My mother was the firstborn in her family. And my grandfather, who studied pharmacy in Haiti, had ended up going to the Congo to teach. And when he was there, he had some sort of situation. Apparently, there was a time in history where there was a big kind of like brain drain happening from Haiti where people were actually going into Haiti and like finding doctors and scientists and pharmacists and psychologists, like all these like really well-educated people, and just kind of like sending them to all these other different countries around the world, for work and for stuff like that. But Haitians were looked at, especially in the era that my grandfather came from, as kind of like intellectuals of the Caribbean, and that's kind of like the I guess like the movement that you would say my grandfather came out of. And so because of that, my grandfather had a lot of pride in Haiti. He and I think Haitians, being a people who had created like the wave of independence, right? Especially in the Western Hemisphere. Haiti is the first and the only slave colony that freed themselves, right? So my grandfather goes to Congo. He's in Africa. The Congo is also the last place in Africa that was colonized. And as I get into this story, I'm going to definitely tap into that more as we go along. But I think that that's very important to note in the way that my grandfather had a certain pride coming from Haiti and then going to the Congo, where there's just a certain sense of like resistance there, right? And also mystery when it comes to like the Western world and the way that they kind of see us, and a sort of fear. But I think my grandfather identified that, especially with the Congolese children. Like my grandfather would talk about how they were the best behaved students, and he just had a really wonderful life there. And him and my grandmother, I talked to them, especially as my grandmother was passing away. And one of the last conversations we had was them telling me about how living in the Congo was the greatest time of their life. They talked about how they had so much fun, of course, like raising kids. But when they were just kind of like young and in their prime, and they had each other and they were living in the Congo, that was just the most beautiful, most fun time of their life. And, they said that they always dream about that. They always think about those times and love it. Right. So it goes to say that like this idea that the Congo is like this dirty, desolate place that has nothing for no one is not the idea that I grew up with. I grew up with this idea of the Congo actually being this place of fruitfulness, of beautifulness, of children who are well educated by people who look like them. And, it's sort of a dream in a sense, right? Like I hate to say this, but kind of like an idea of Wakanda, right? Like that's what the Congo represented for me as I was growing up. And so, even in the Congo itself, there's this whole idea, like I said, once again, of the Congo being like the last place that Westerners, especially like the British or anyone, was able to even like really get in and start to study and start to quote unquote discover. And really by the time that Westerners had even got into the Congo, right, to start to like there was a time when people were told, especially white people were told, if you go into the Congo, you won't make it out. right? Like, people actually had to go in and come back and say, I survived. And that's what started the exploration of, like, the Congo even deeper as far as outsiders, especially Europeans, were concerned. So we're talking about a place that has a long history of kind of being isolated and being by itself. However, once the outsiders started to come in and once colonialization started happening, this was actually one of the main areas where even black people turned on themselves, right? Turned on ourselves. So you have a slave trader who goes by the name of Tipu Tip. It's Tippu, and then last name Tip. This kind of like was a nickname of his. Tipu Tip ended up being the most famous, richest slave trader of all time. He had a connection with the Dutch and he had a connection with the British, and he was all about raiding African villages, raiding people in their homes, capturing them, and then selling them into slavery, right? This was his whole business. He came from a rich family and he had the resources to equip people with guns. And people say that even his nickname, Tipu Tip, came from the sound of that tip-tip sound that the guns would make as he would be like shooting them off and taking over villages, right? So this is, I bring up this story, not to make it seem like, oh, black people, we're responsible for our own slavery or anything like that. But actually to just bring light to the fact that the Congo itself, being the last place to have this sort of like this, to be a part of the slave trade, right, has a very real and remembered history of what it's like for people of all colors, black and white and whoever, to come in and start to take advantage of them, right? So this is why you can have a situation where when people from the UN, meaning well and not meaning well, come in, they are looked at as criminals. They are looked at as evil because the history of people coming into the Congo to help or to quote unquote discover or to bring them quote unquote humanity always ends up with the people who are there, who live there, being stolen from their land or being murdered. That's it. So they just do not trust this shit. And when you tell them, hey, you have to change the way you bury people. Hey, you have to change the way that the way that you act as a community. You can't share bodily fluids. You can't touch each other, right? This does not make sense to them, and they're not going to listen to you because they have a clear, remembered, pretty fucking recent history of being fucked by anyone who comes from the outside, even people who look like them. And so you have someone like Pappy who wants to do the right thing, but because he's on the side of the outsiders, he's a problem, right? He's bad too. He's tainted. And this, y'all, is the real fucking evil and problem of slavery and colonialization. The fact that it's impossible at this point to even have a totally homegrown Congolese fucking like scientist and healthcare worker, because of the simple fact that a lot of these towns don't even have the fucking infrastructures to educate people in the ways that they would need to, not to be healers, right? They can be healers based on their own information. They can actually solve shit, but to have that recognition from the UN or from any of the outsiders to actually run their own shit and not have that shit be taken over or not have that shit be cast aside as some other's form of non-efficient medicine, right? You have to be taught from the outside. You have to be validated from the outside. So there's no way that these people can even be self-sufficient. Because because for them to be self-sufficient, then it makes the UN and these peacekeepers and all this fucking, the WHO, whatever, the fucking World Health Organization, WHO, whoever the fuck wants to come in, right? The ways that they make money by quote unquote sending aid to Africa, right, is by actually keeping the people there as ignorant as they can about solving their own issues and about helping themselves, right? Or just not respecting and actually appreciating the way that they want to solve their own issues and saying that those are not good enough solutions. So we need to go in there and take that away from them, right? So this is actually not about Pappy. And the fucked up thing about it, the fucked up thing about all of this is that actually human nature is to attack the person who is closest to you. Not even to go to the root of the problem at all, right? So everyone who's involved here, from Pappy to his murderers, all of this goes back to the history of colonialization and the history of the slave trade in the Congo. So when people say that like we live in a post-colonial world, you really have to take a step back and ask them what they mean by that. Because this colonialization isn't over. It's just shifted and it's changed. And if they mean that to say that, oh, it's just post-colonial, we're all just dealing with the effects of it, I don't know. Tell that to Pappy's family.